I will turn off the music. So welcome everyone. My name is Bria Castellano. I use they, them, their pronouns. And I am a scientific program manager for training and DEI at ChEM-H, which is Chemistry, Engineering, and Medicine for Human Health, which is an interdisciplinary research institute here at Stanford. And Lynette, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lynette Haberman. I'm the Academic and Student Services Coordinator for ChEM-H. I work alongside Bria, and we're really excited today to talk about our postbac program in target discovery.
Yes, and so yeah, we started this postbac program last year. So we actually had our first cohort pictured here last quarter. Stanford's on the quarter system, so it was the autumn quarter. And so we have 5 postbacs that started and have been here now for about a few months now. And this is our first group photo taken safely with COVID precautions. Stanford's really good with testing, as other universities are right now as well. And we have bi-weekly meetings. And so at our last one that we were in person, we were able to take this photo in our building in a very prom-esque pose and really get to show. They come from different parts of the country. Some have been local here and some have come from the Midwest as well as the East Coast to be part of our inaugural cohort. And now we're recruiting for our second cohort, which would also be about 5 postbac researchers to start this coming fall. And so just to get started with like kind of the outline for what we're going to be going over, we'll go over kind of what is ChEM-H and then what is this Innovative Medicines Accelerator, IMA, which are the 2 bodies that are sponsoring and supporting this postbac program. And then kind of what is our overview of the postbac program in target discovery, and then being able to go deeper into the intern application, the different components, as well as kind of, you know, if you have any questions, we could answer them either throughout the presentation, or we also have time at the end to be able to go over that. And so here, there's just a lot of different types of GIFs or images that we have on slides just to keep you all engaged. And so this whole purpose of this intern or postbac researcher informational meeting is kind of find out if this is a right fit for you, right? Like there's a lot of different postbac programs out there. We want to make sure, just like planet Earth, right, that Stanford is going to be a great place for you to succeed and develop as a researcher and as a scientist. And that we want to make sure that you know what the expectations are of us as a program, as well as of what we are expecting in terms of your application, so that you can put in a competitive application and be one of our finalists, and then end up actually coming here to conduct your postbac research experience. So to start off, what is ChEM-H? So as I mentioned, ChEM-H is Chemistry, Engineering, and Medicine for Human Health. It's an interdisciplinary research institute here at Stanford. And we have Carolyn Bertozzi, who's here on the left, who is our director. She just actually won the AAAS Lifetime Mentorship Award last week, as well as the Wolf Prize for her work on glycocalyx and like glycoprotein biology and really developing the field of chemical biology. So here at Stanford, that experience of hers of combining chemistry, biology, and really building, you know, chemical technologies to investigate biological experimental research problems is kind of the foundation of what ChEM-H is. We want to take chemistry, engineering, and medicine, which could be fields that are kind of related but could be separate, and really combine them into one institute and one building. So we really get a collaborative space where on the floors of our building, you're going to have labs from chemistry, from engineering, from biology, from the School of Medicine, where traditionally at Stanford, they would be in their own separate buildings, maybe even, you know, pretty far away from each other on campus. We wanted to create a collaborative environment in our building where we bring in labs from these different areas and have them work side by side with each other. And so the quote that we have is that ChEM-H is a hub of innovation that brings the power of diversity to improve human health. Diversity of disciplines, which include the life sciences, physical sciences, and clinical sciences. And most importantly, of course, the diversity of people, because you do get the best outcomes and the best creative ideas when you have people coming from different backgrounds, different cultural spaces, different research areas, and you're really able to come up with a creative space and creative ideas that otherwise, if you all thought the same, you'd come up with the same answers. And so that's what ChEM-H is really about. And a little bit more detail about ChEM-H is that we have Faculty Institute scholars, which we have about 15 of them that are placed within our ChEM-H building. And then they are actually like closely affiliated with ChEM-H, and these scholars are picked for their research background as well as the identities and the representation they have within their scientific fields. And then we have about 80 plus affiliated faculty with ChEM-H that are across the campus at Stanford that are mentors for our graduate students, mentors for our postbacs. And so they don't have to necessarily be within our building to be affiliated with ChEM-H. And if you're thinking ahead and you're interested in a PhD program, we also have the Chemistry Biology Interface Graduate Program. It's an interdisciplinary graduate PhD program that is supportive of another PhD program, where you would first apply to, say, the chemistry department or the biology department in their PhD program. And once you accept to come to Stanford, you would apply to a supplementary PhD program, our CBI program, where we provide a lot more mentorship, a lot more professional development and support for our students in the space, as well as building community and really pushing their research in terms of, having it be interdisciplinary and really thinking about how can I take research from the lab and make it more relevant to clinical trials, more relevant to diagnostics, more relevant to making real world impact and not just having your research be stuck in the academic space. And as I mentioned, we're an interdisciplinary institute. So we actually we cross 3 schools here at Stanford: the School of Medicine, the School of Engineering, and the School of Humanities and Sciences. And so those typically are 3 different parts of campus that we've now brought in together to really increase that collaborative feeling and really creating that network as seen by this gift of connecting these things at Stanford that may be separate and really connecting them so we can make the biggest impacts in our research as well as within our communities here at Stanford. And then next we have to talk a little bit about the IMA, which is the Innovative Medicines Accelerator. The accelerator seeks to accelerate the translation of Stanford research discoveries into new medicines while expanding our knowledge of human biology. And so everything I just discussed about how do you take your research and how do you push it into clinical relevance or into diagnostics or even into the private sector and starting your own company, the IMA, sorry, I have a cat, and so she may also come into the screen or you'll hear her cat food. Our director, Chetan Khosla, who's also a faculty member here, is the director of the IMA. This whole purpose is to really create infrastructure to really help these projects get pushed into the clinical space, get pushed into the private sector and start companies or get pushed into diagnostics. And so one of the things that we have here is that, discoveries that are made in cells or discoveries that are made in academic labs, they could get stuck there. And so there's this thing called the Valley of Death, where research kind of could get stuck and not really progress into therapies for human patients. And what the IMA does is build infrastructure, build bridges to allow your research and your ideas to have the support to really move into therapeutic spaces. And we have grants that could fund these initial trials or these initial experiments that could really take the basic biology research or the basic research that you're doing and really push it into the next space of that could really impact human health. And so now, what are we all here for? You're all here to learn about our new postbac program for target discovery. And so this ChEM-H/IMA postbac program, it's a paid 2-year on-campus research training program. And hopefully at the end of this program, all of our researchers will be prepared to apply to competitive PhD programs and successfully begin their graduate work in the life sciences or in STEM. And so just like ISMA here with Kronk, right? Science is an apprenticeship type area where you really learn from the people that are around you and that really train you. And our postbac program really has that mentorship component, both within the lab and then as well as in our program with myself, as well as Lynette, really offering programmatic support and professional development looking for or moving forward in the 2 years of your training. And so just to get started, right, what are we looking for in the postbacs that are going to be applying, and who are we looking to reach out to bring onto Stanford campus? Well, of course, we're looking for those who are recent college graduates within the past 36 months who have a degree in STEM fields, and that this postbac program is meant for those who are interested in pursuing a PhD in the biomedical sciences or related fields. This is not a postbac program, for you to get research experience to apply to medical school, but it's to come here and gain research experience so that you can become more competitive applying to different PhD graduate programs. And that's important because that really develops kind of what is the training, what is our development in terms of the professional development workshops that we put together. They're all geared towards making you more competitive and a much more confident research scientist during your postbac, as well as moving forward in your career in science and research. And so we don't have any, or we have very minimal amounts of like medical school prep in the programming. We're also looking for those who have demonstrated a commitment to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, either in your personal life or in your academic or professional spaces. And what do we mean by that? So you could have personal experiences, or you could identify as a historically underrepresented or historically excluded group, however you want to define that. As well as, you could have different initiatives, different projects, different clubs that you are a part of that could really, show that you've been really building your community to be a space for others coming from backgrounds that may have not been able to see themselves within STEM. And so we take both. We take, if you're a really great advocate for DEI in terms of, actually pushing forward initiatives and projects, or if you personally, have experiences in this space, your perspective in science is also really important and really needed, that we're also looking for these different types of perspectives to come into our postbac program. This is a 2-year active participation program in both research and professional development. We are not accepting anyone that will only be able to come for 1 year. So if you're only taking a 1-year gap year for whatever reasons, this isn't the postbac program postbac program for you, because what we're aiming for is that you'll have at least 1 year of in-house research, training and development, as well as all the professional developments that we do with the program. And then you'll be able to apply competitively your 2nd year of your postbac. And that means you'll have stronger letters of recommendation because you'll be working in a lab already for a year, at least by the time you're applying, where if you were only here for a year and then you were applying, you start in September and then you apply in December, how is our program really helping you be more competitive because you've only been working in a space for 3 months? And that, the relationships that you're developing may not be as strong, if they wouldn't be as strong as if you were here for a 2-year program. And so if you're already feeling confident that you can apply, after 1 year of a gap year, then we think that, this program isn't necessarily for you, because we're really aiming for people to come into our postbac program that, are seeking research opportunities that they may or may not have been able to have in their undergraduate institution. And so, right, it's really opening up access to research opportunities to scholars and to researchers that, because they may have gone to a primarily teaching institution, that they didn't have access to this type of research. We want to provide these opportunities to you all.
And just one more thing. We also recognize that at this time, one of the thoughts that we were thinking about when developing the program is understanding the situation with COVID and inability to be able to get into a lab. So maybe you had a lab experience set up, maybe you are working with a PI at your research institution, but that fell through because you were not allowed to be on campus. So that is also something to think about. What we were thinking about when we designed this program is to help sort of offset the issues that or like came about because of the COVID situation, especially for most of you that are probably currently in undergrad.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for adding that on, Lynette. Yeah, everything about that's correct, right? The pandemic that's happening over the past few years now really displaced a lot of research opportunities that when I was an undergrad, I started doing research like my sophomore year. And so if you're kind of applying for a postbac program now, right, it's like your last couple years of undergrad, which could have been very difficult, like Lynette said. And so, yes, we also take that into consideration that, you know, we're not expecting you to have research background coming in. If you do, that's great. But if you don't, that doesn't count as a positive or negative to us, because we know the current state of affairs in the world has really made already undergraduate research opportunities pre-pandemic were hard to get. And then throwing on the pandemic made it even more inaccessible. So that's also things that we're considering. And in this space, since this is the postbac program for target discovery, in terms of, you know, finding, doing research that could really impact human health, you should really also express your interest in pursuing research that is related to human health or drug discovery. And these projects, they could really be wide ranging in terms of the scope, but in some ways you have to think, oh, if I do this type of research, how could this impact human health? Even one of the things that one of our faculty members says, who works kind of on like climate change, they're like, well, me working on, you know, technologies that really impact greenhouse emissions, that impacts human health because, right, climate change is going to affect all of us. And if we could have research that is geared towards alleviating the impacts of climate change, that's impacting human health, right? So that's just like an example of how we want you to think not only of, oh, I'm working on cancer and this is related to human health. How can you take your research interests and talk about them in a way that shows that you have a way of thinking about research that is, you know, looking at the big picture and where are the different types of impacts that you could be making that impact human health. It doesn't have to be, you know, that very clear clinical cancer related, you know, perspective. It could be different as long as you could express that and say, this is why I think this research is appropriate to do this type of work. And then, of course, since this is on site, the ability to relocate to the Stanford area for the duration of the program. I'm here about 30 miles south of San Francisco. We have more eligibility things in detail at the end, but do we have any questions right now from anyone? Feel free to put them in the chat or go off of mute if you feel comfortable doing so. And also feel free to introduce yourself, like, you know, what year you are and kind of where you're coming from.
Hi, I'm Alana. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Alana. I'm from Long Island, specifically I'm in New York right now. And for the relocation, I was wondering if the program helps with relocation, or would I have to figure that out on my own?
So we give, so we have a very competitive stipend to move to the area. And then we also provide some moving fees that, you know, hopefully you would be able to utilize to get tickets or down payments on, down payment, is that what it's called? A deposit for housing. But you are hired on here as a staff member, not as a student, not as anything like that. So you have staff benefits, but so you don't get access to student housing. And so all of that, we are able to go over with you, you know, oh, here are neighborhoods that people go to. There's Stanford websites that have housing resources for you to look through, but we as a program do not house you or provide housing options for you or like pay for your tickets to come. We believe with the salary that we provide, as well as some moving expenses in the beginning, that you would be able to do that on your own or reach out to you know, our first cohort now of postbacs that have already done this move. And we have someone who moved from New York, you know, that could also help you or talk to you about it or look at potential places. And so we as a program don't officially do that, but we provide certain types of resources that could help you with the relocation. Does that answer most of that question, Elena?
Yes, that did. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Elena, Alana.
Alana.
Alana, thank you.
Hi,
And
I also
so,
have a question.
Yes, Alejandro.
Yeah, my name is Alejandro. So I'm a pre-med student, and I think you said that people that are not looking are looking for medical schools that shouldn't apply to this program, right? So should I not apply?
Yes. So for us, the goal of this program is to have people become competitive for PhD programs. And so a lot of um, our our programming that we put together is not geared towards medical school. And so there are most likely other postbac programs that are geared towards helping you be more competitive for medical school that would be a better fit for you. If you're applying to say like an MD PhD program, that may be a little bit, that has a huge PhD portion to it, but we aren't providing as much support in that space. And so, I mean, it's up to you. You could still apply, but that, if you're interested in going into the medical field and to medical school, it may be better for you to apply to another postbac program that is more relevant to that type of training.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. I see a question here from Yuki in the chat, and then we'll go to you, Robert. Does this program include classes or exams? And so this one does not have any classes or exams. You can audit courses, but you're not getting graded or anything along those lines in that context. We have bi-weekly meetings that you come in and meet with us as a cohort every 2 weeks, to go over professional development stuff, but it's not like, you're taking a class and studying. The majority of this postbac program is getting hands-on research experience. So the majority of your time is going to be in the lab. And then the things that we ask for you in terms of the postbac program is geared towards making you a well-rounded researcher and competitive for a PhD program moving forward. Does that answer that question? Yes, thank you, Yuki. Robert, I see you put your hand down. Was that the question that you had?
No, can I ask my question now if there's still time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So I was wondering, Robert, I'm from Chicago. I was wondering how do I phrase this? Like, is there anybody in the current cohort that's trying to pursue MD PhD following completion of the program?
We have one person that has expressed interest in MD PhD programs. And so, yes, we do have someone that is here that stated that, and we know that. And so, we're providing her with, MCAT resources and all of that, but we're not having a, how to apply workshop on MD PhD programs, right? We're having a workshop on how to apply to PhD programs. We will have a panel where we bring in students and trainees, from PhD programs across the country to come and be on a panel. And we will include one MD PhD person on that panel to get that perspective. But for the most part, our training is geared towards those pursuing a PhD. And we know, right, if you're pursuing or interested in doing an MD PhD, that, it could be flexible in terms of you might realize, you really enjoy doing research. And then, you transition from a med school applicant into a PhD applicant. So we also know that when I was an undergrad, I saw a lot of that happen, right? Where people started doing research because they're like, I need this for my medical school applications. And then they do it. And then they realize actually, I really like the research part. And so I'll either pursue an MD PhD, or for the most part, most people end up switching completely from pre-med to a PhD applicant. Thank you for that question, Robert. Elizabeth, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, so in terms of auditing classes, if we wanted to take a course, like a graduate level course that we were really interested in, would the program provide us with funding to be able to take the course? Or would we even be able to use our own stipend to pay for a course that we wanted to take at Stanford? And would the program support us being able to do that?
So so we have some students that are auditing courses, and when you audit courses, you don't pay tuition or anything. That's basically an agreement between you, the department, and the faculty member of oh yes, it's okay for Elizabeth to sit in on the class and learn. And for the most part, we won't pay though because we don't pay tuition in this space, and so we will not like fund you to take the courses. There are some employee benefits that there's very small amount of funds for you to like pay for professional development workshops and, you know, potentially courses that are, you know, from like Cold Spring Harbor or the Marine Lab, MLB, one of those courses, those science courses that are out there. There are funds that we have for staff that you could utilize in those spaces. In terms of like actually taking a course where you would get a grade letter that, you know, potentially could help your GPA or whatever in that context, I don't believe we're able to support that because we're not paying for your tuition. And if you're not aware, tuition at Stanford is actually very high. And so paying that, I don't think that would be a feasible thing, but you were definitely able to audit courses.
Oh, yes, I know that tuition is very high. I just was wondering, because in the summer, you can take classes at different schools and you can pay per credit. I know that during the school year, you don't pay per credit, you pay like for everything associated with coming to school. So that's why I was just asking.
Yes. So apart from the staff funds that we have, those are the only funds that we would be able to support in that space. We wouldn't be able to pay per credit outside of that. And I'm not sure, there's of course regulations around how you use those staff funds that like there, I'm not sure if you would be able to use that for those types of courses. But you would be able to audit baseline.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, Elizabeth. Grace, I see you also have your hand up.
So I just wanted to ask, so I'm actually currently working with a graduate student from Stanford, and so I would be really interested in continuing to do my research with her. And we are doing a program that's related to drug discovery. So I was wondering how easy it would be to choose her as my mentor and get paired with her.
So for that, right, we also have the way that the mentors are selected is that the mentors apply to be a mentor in this space. And then once we have the finalists for the postbac program, as well as the finalists for the mentors, we like have you meet with 2 to 3 and see like, and then you put in your preferences, right? Like, oh, here are my top choices of who I would want to be placed with. And so that is, that's how that selection process goes, right? So if both of you are in the finalist stage and you both put each other #1, then that doesn't seem to be a problem. But also keep in mind, right, like this is a space for people to be able to get a research opportunity that they otherwise wouldn't be able to have. And so I'm just saying that in an honest way of, right, like if you're already a Stanford student coming in, that there has to be, your application has to be very, very compelling for us to say, yes, we're gonna sponsor you as opposed to someone else that hasn't had this type of research opportunity in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Elizabeth, do you have another question?
Yes, I was going to ask if there is a penalty for being from an R1 institution, given the pandemic and how it, you know, sort of messed with everything.
We're having everyone, right, like apply and seeing, you know, where people fall. We do want to create this opportunities for those that may not have access to this, right? But there's a lot of different reasons, as you mentioned, in terms of like the pandemic and different access to different research opportunities that, you know, we're open, it's open to everyone to apply. It's just that in this space, right, like you have to make sure that if you've had these potential opportunities and weren't able to take advantage of them, right? Like why weren't you able to do that? And like why, you know, why is this program an opportunity that would help you that you otherwise wouldn't have had in the past? Okay, we have a few more slides and there's more time for questions. We're gonna go a little bit more into the details of our program. But, you know, as I say, you know, apply to the program and we'll go through the applications, right? And we'll see like if we feel that, oh, this is an opportunity that's good for you, right? Like you never wanna not apply if you really feel like this is something that is meant for you. And so next we have like, what are some of the benefits? So we've kind of gone over this a little bit with you all with answering some of your questions. So of course you're gonna get research training in a Stanford lab. You'll get mentorship from Stanford faculty and the research community here at Stanford because you'll be working closely either with a graduate student, a postdoc, a staff researcher, or a Stanford faculty if they are like a very young pre-tenure lab, and they don't have a lot of people in their group, that you might be working very closely with the faculty mentor in terms of developing your research experience. And then as well as staff. So myself and Lynette, we both went to graduate school. I have a PhD in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley. I did a postdoc at Genentech, which is a biotechnology company here in the San Francisco area. And Lynette has done a lot of work with teaching and student, like academic services and student support, that, we as staff also are a great resource to really help develop you as a researcher moving forward, from our own lived, experiences going through academic training, as well as the work that we've done in terms of, community building and advocacy work in these spaces. And so we are a great resource, and why we're in charge of these programs and developing this curriculum, because I'm taking my lived experiences as an undergraduate, a PhD student, as a postdoc, to really support our postbac researchers to be fully well-rounded and competitive for their next stage of their career. Of course, we have a monthly salary and health insurance. You are hired on as a similar level as like a research technician, that would come into a lab, except since you're a postbac researcher, your main job duties are going to be doing, discovery-based research, where, potentially other technicians could be like a lab manager that is, there to organize, order lab equipment, and maybe do some research. For us, the main purpose of you being here is doing research in the lab. So you will be paid a competitive salary to relocate here and live in the area, as well as hopefully give you enough funds to support you in terms of applying to graduate school, which is very expensive, as well as if you have to move for graduate school, right? There's all of those expenses that most graduate programs don't support you with, that by the end of the 2 years, you would be able to have some money saved aside to really help keep you financially stable into the next stages of your career in graduate school, where, if we're honest, you're not going to get paid that much. And so we want to make sure that you have some financial stability by offering a competitive salary. We don't necessarily say the number, but just know that coming here, you will be okay. And there shouldn't be any financial issues with living in the area. We also think about community building. So we have bi-weekly meetings where we meet as a group. You have, you're invited to other events and initiatives that we have within ChEM-H and at Stanford, in terms of seminars, in terms of our monthly meetings with our PhD students. We bring you all together in different social aspects and networking aspects, so that you could, one, build community and personal relationships amongst each other in your cohort and the postbac program, as well as the greater Stanford trainee community here. And so, as I mentioned, part of my role is doing DEI work within ChEM-H. And so I also think about all of our training programs and all of our events with a very DEI-centric perspective. Like, how do we make sure that our programs are equitable? How do we make sure that all of the things, our events, are able to be accessed by all the people within our community? And so, as I mentioned, you have access to different types of Stanford resources, like the staff funds that could help support you every year with different coursework or professional development. And then, of course, since we are a postbac program, we have a more formal training in terms of professional development, which we'll be going over in the next slide. And so here, right, professional development, we're all seeds and we're all looking to grow, and we're hoping that Stanford is the place for you to be able to do this. Lynette, would you like to take over on this part and share your screen?
Yes.
Stop sharing.
Just move the bar everywhere.
Looks good.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay. So you've heard us talk a lot about the program. And so you're probably wondering, okay, once I get here, what do you do? So to talk a little bit more about just our program development plan, we have bi-weekly program meetings. They're an hour a week, an hour every time that we meet. And some of the things that we cover during those bi-weekly meetings are things like getting started in a research lab, just figuring out once you're in the lab, getting settled and just getting comfortable with learning all of the rules, going over the trainings that you need, whatnot, best lab practices, as well as research design. And we also cover, we spent recently an hour talking about reading a paper, how to read a scientific paper, what are the best ways to go about doing it productively. So things like that are going to help you sort of get settled into the research environment, especially if you haven't been in one before in a lab, and just kind of get familiarized with designing your research as well as getting settled in a lab. We also talk about soft social skills. So things like mentoring up. We do a workshop where we talk about how to navigate the spaces with you and your mentor and how to have effective communication with one another in order for that to be like the best mentor experience that you have and for each of you to get the best out of each other. We also bring in people from Vaden Health Center to talk about wellness. So this is going to be a transition time. Potentially you'll be moving. And it could just be that you need to find a routine or figure out your wellness, talk about things like imposter syndrome and how to navigate that and learn about resiliency, especially and like coping with failure, things like that. Just keeping in mind that this is a time that can be very, very stressful. You're in a new experience, and then you're also thinking about applying to graduate school. And so how do you manage the stresses of that? And so we take that very seriously. And we think that learning healthy habits is the sort of foundation to having a healthy experience moving into that transition period. We also, as Bria has mentioned, we work with networking. So it gives you opportunity to engage in community building, go to different events across campus with different communities, and to build your network at Stanford in order to help make you have those connections everywhere. We also work on presentation skills. So one of the key things that we like to hope people do once they get established in their lab is to present at conferences or to present within their lab groups. And so learning about how to be a scientific communicator and to do that effectively. And so that's something that we also work on in our bi-weekly meetings. So that could be either an oral presentation, it could be a poster presentation. We can also help with poster design, how to create a poster for a presentation and whatnot. And then of course, there will be a lot of work on applying to graduate school and also applying to fellowships. So as Bria mentioned, we do things like a graduate panel. Oh, I see that someone has raised their hand. Elizabeth, would you like to ask a question?
Oh yes, I was going to ask if there were opportunities for us to interact with the broader community. So not, not just Stanford, but the community around Stanford. So maybe go out and do things like that. I know that this is just the bi-weekly meeting, so it may come in like some other slide that I'm not asking about. Yeah.
Are you talking about like within like the broader community of like Palo Alto or the Bay Area? Yes. Bria, I think we haven't spoke about that, especially like specifically in our programming plan, but I think that like if you're here and you're living here, there are probably opportunities for you to get involved. Bria, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I would say, right, one, there's like obviously like student organizations that you could get involved with. We have a SOCNAS chapter here, which is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And, if they have opportunities to reach out into the community to do community work, that's up to you, right? Like that is how you want to spend your time. For this program, you are hourly. And so we expect you to work or like do program things 40 hours per week. And then that is, you in agreement with your lab really decide like, how does that 40 hours look? But apart from that, if you have other values, you have other community aspects that you want to do, right? I encourage you to do that. for myself, I did a lot of my training, and then extracurricularly, I did a lot of diversity work, which really helped, keep me motivated in lab. And so if you want to work with middle school kids or anything, or like mentoring or tutoring on the side, right, that's up to you. And part of the reason why we say 40 hours a week is we want you to be able to develop really great work-life balance in terms of being productive when you're in your lab or you're working, and then being able to have time outside of that to do passion projects or work with communities, that you want to work with. And all of these things that we have here, right? Myself and Lynette, we didn't have the easiest go-abouts in graduate school or our scientific trainings. And so we're hoping that by having these things that are a lot more structured in some context in our postbac program, allow you to develop these skills that through a lot of tears on my end, I learned through a lot of struggles, that we're hoping that we're able to build up these toolkits for you to be able to explore different areas of yourself, and that, research isn't necessarily your number one, and that you are a fully well-rounded person, and that there's other aspects outside of the lab that make you authentically you, and that you need to be able to figure out how to do that in a professional space.
Yeah. And these are all conversations. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, but all of that rant or all of that soapbox, we as a postbac program don't have anything formalized in terms of going out into the community and doing community work. And so that would be engaging with student orgs that are on campus, or finding other volunteer opportunities outside that isn't formally through our postbac program.
Okay, so are there any other questions? Okay, so down to the nitty-gritty, the things that I think a lot of people are always interested in, always have questions about. So application details for our program. You need letters of recommendation. We require 2, and we have a preference that one of them be from a previous research mentor or from a STEM professor who taught you in a class. So ideally, the strongest letters that we're going to be looking for are those that come from someone that has that you've worked with, whether it be in a lab or as a professor who's seen your work in their course. There's also 2 short essays. One is talking about describing your career goals, and the other is describing your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a little bit about
Click back one, you double.
Yep, one more, there we go. A little bit about the first one. So describing your career goals, we're looking for about 500 words. And we hope that you would describe clearly how the ChEM-H IMA Postbac Program in target discovery will help you achieve your goals. We're looking for how this program specifically can help you get to the next step in your career, and then for you to potentially outline your goals for the next 5 years within your career. So where do you see yourself coming out of this program, and how the program and the benefits of the program are going to help you to achieve those goals? The second, describe your commitment to advanced DEI, also around 500 words. And so Bria talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Taking action to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very core and central value to ChEM-H and IMA. And so we're seeking applications from individuals that are aligned with those essential core values. So like Bria mentioned, whether it's that you identify as an underrepresented or underserved member of a community, or you have done work surrounding DEI, take this opportunity, take these 500, I know that's a very short essay, but take these 500 words to really talk about your experience and your commitment to DEI, and show us why it's important to you and why you value it, and then how that can align with us as well. So eligibility requirements. You must be eligible to work in the United States to apply for this program. We would like to see you demonstrate a commitment to pursue a STEM PhD. And we would like that you have completed your bachelor's degree in a STEM discipline by the time of the start of the program, or within 36 months prior to applying to the program. You also need to express in your application an interest in conducting interdisciplinary research that's related to advancing human health through drug discovery. Women plus and gender minorities, people from underserved and underrepresented backgrounds, and people who have disabilities are encouraged to apply. And we need you to be able to conduct research at Stanford on campus, on site for 2 years, and an ability to relocate to the San Francisco Bay Area and find housing, as well as make sure that in alignment with Stanford's campus policies, you are fully vaccinated with a booster for COVID-19. Questions?
And I think one thing I just want to add, which kind of goes, I think, to Elizabeth, your question earlier about, oh, if you came from an R01 institution, there's a lot of privilege in being able to provide free time to work in a lab. And, if you're at an R01 institution and you have, personal circumstances where it's like, I couldn't do that. Like, I can't volunteer for free. I have to, right? There are reasons why you necessarily won't be able to take advantage of all the opportunities that you've had. And that could be personal circumstances, right? Like, I think that's completely valid. Like, I was able to do research as an undergrad because a faculty member said, oh, I'll pay you. And I was like, oh, so I don't have to work at a restaurant 5 days a week to support myself because I moved for college. Right. And that really opened up the door for me to do research where if I wasn't paid, I wouldn't either have done as much research or research at all because I had to pay rent. I had to pay bills. Right. Those are, I think, very, very reasonable. That's a very reasonable thing to be like, I didn't have the privilege to volunteer for free. Right. And so the part of this program is really being able to get access to people in whatever ways that research is inaccessible to them. And of course, we don't necessarily want you to say, or we don't want you to have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to go through struggles that you've been through. But those are one of the ways that we could see oh, this as a person did not have access to these resources, either at their institutions or wherever they're at in their research career. And this is why now this is an opportunity for them to take advantage of this opportunity. And so I just want to say that again of why should we be compelled to give you an opportunity if you potentially had that at your previous institution? And if you're able to explain that well and make a compelling case of this is why I didn't do it, then I think that's completely valid. Where I know there were people in my undergraduate that I told them, I was like, oh, maybe you should try doing research. We have, there's opportunities, paid opportunities, and there were some people that just didn't want to do it. And if it's just that you didn't want to do it, then I don't think that's a good excuse of taking advantage of the opportunities that you have. But given life circumstances, of course, as COVID as well, there are reasons why science and STEM are inaccessible, and we want to make that accessible to everyone. And if you think about it, those who really have a lack of accessibility are those coming from non-R01 institutions. But that's why we say it that way. But if you're coming from an R01 institution, you just have to express compellingly, right, why you weren't able to gain certain types of experiences. Do we have, that is the end of our slides. We have about 8 minutes left until the next hour. Does anyone have any additional questions? The thing about eligible to work in the US means, right, we don't sponsor work visas. So you either have to be a US citizen, a permanent resident, or a DACA, a dreamer, right, where you're able to work within the United States without us on our end sponsoring a type of work visa for you.
Hi, I have a question. This is gonna sound really bizarre. I am still an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working towards getting my PhD. I do want to apply for grad school, and I am interested in pursuing for my PhD eventually. I was still wondering, should I still apply to this type of program, or would there be another program that I can apply to for at least graduate to start getting me in that direction heading to my PhD, if so that makes sense.
You said you're an undergraduate right now?
Yes, I'm currently an undergrad. I'm a junior in college. I'm about to be a senior. I have to talk to my advisor about some things, but I'm currently an undergraduate student, yes. So
in this context, you have to have had undergraduate degree in STEM within the past 36 months of applying. Or if you're like graduating in May, right, that also counts. Like if you're graduating this May, but when you start this fall, because the start time is like September 2022, that you would have had to have graduated by that time. If you're still gonna be, thank you for coming early so that if you want to apply next year, right, for our third cohort, right, you're more than welcome to. But if you're currently an undergraduate right now, I don't believe you would be eligible to be selected as a postbac researcher because we are expecting you to work full-time. And if you're also a full-time student, that it just doesn't align well with that. Grace, if we need to move out to Palo Alto earlier than September, would that be possible? Grace, that is really up to you. But the funds that you would get to help are kind of like in your first paycheck. And so you would have to put stuff on credit cards first or something along those lines. And then when you start work, your first paycheck will be a little bit bigger because of some moving and signing bonuses that are added on from that. But we don't help early. And so it's kind of up to you how early you would want to move. But you would have to, of course, be moved by the time you start here. Awesome. Thank you, Yuki. Thank you for coming. Is there any other questions?
I had a follow-up question. So I remember like seeing like the members of the first cohort. I think there was only 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this second cohort application, will you guys just be accepting 5 people?
Right now, our goal is 5. Of course, that may be depending on the applicant pool, if there are things that happen to our funding source. But right now, our goal is to have another cohort of 5 to start this fall.
Okay, and then I know that deadline is for March 15th. By when will we hear back, like if you're accepted or not?
We will go over applications within the first couple of weeks after March 15th, and then being able to reach out for interviews around that time. And we would hope that you would know about our decisions maybe a month after applications are due. But depending on different types of circumstances, that may be a little different. But once things are going, we will do our best to be communicative about our timeline.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Awesome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for listening. If you are watching this video after, feel free to contact Lynette or myself through the ChEM-H website. And we look forward to seeing all of your applications.